live, I got distracted by my new knitted piece. It's not quite 4:15, so I'll just tell you that it's a gorgeous day in Seattle, and the star magnolia on in the neighbor's front yard is blooming. It's always lovely, and then the tree just it drops a lot of stuff. Let's just say that. And some of it drops onto my deck. But it looks like there are lots of people out and about in Seattle, and we are grateful for a day that didn't require a wool coat. So let's see, it's not quite 4:15. What else can I tell you? Everything is blooming. Hummingbirds have not been around much. I can't tell whether it's because they got mad because I let their feeder go dry or because there's just so much other good stuff out there that they don't need me right now. And that's good. Always happy that nature is providing. So this has been an interesting week. All kinds of craziness going on out in our world, and all of it, of course, which could have been avoided, in my opinion, and is completely due to the idiocy of the person who was elected president. I keep saying to Mitch, we could have had kindness and joy. Instead, we get this. So anyhow, the lighting's perhaps not perfect because it's so bright outside. I made this. I'll show you the whole structure of it shortly, but it's just a neck wrap, and you could, of course, wear it, front to back and have more coverage in the front. But I'm pretty happy with it. Although I will admit, I'm not supposed to do this, but I just knitted it. I didn't write a pattern beforehand. So my task tonight is to make some notes so I can write a pattern, because I ended up really liking it. And this is actually going to my spouse. I don't know whether you can see. It's got kind of 3 points, and then it goes into the tails. This is how much yarn I have left over. This is an ounce of DK alpaca. And this one is a 2-ply, so this is the lighter color, and it's a bamboo, which is dyed this turquoise color, and then the natural colored alpaca. So let's see. And then the other is just natural dyed alpaca. And I used this, my slow stitch, SLOUGH, which is what I used for this, and I'm like completely obsessed with it right now. The structure of this, I cast on, I always work from the large part to the narrow part, because otherwise I find it too depressing. So I cast on to have these long tails. They are not quite the same length. I made one probably 7 inches longer than the other. I can't recall whether that was intentional or because I wasn't counting very good. And you can see I made a mistake here, and I'm just going to tie the knot over it. And so then this was bound off. So I worked from here, and I started to run out of the brown yarn. So I had to get a little creative, but I was really filling in the center part with a lot of short rows. So it all ended up, and I kept moving the horizontal rib out so that it was just, the last probably like a third of the entire, well, maybe a quarter, that ends up being completely in the slow stitch. There's several places where I did short rows and other places where I made mistakes. So that was my current knitting. This has been blocked, and I have to take the final gauge. When I got bored with that, I worked on this, which is in the round swatch, and I wanted the body to be on a bias so that the trim would be bias. And so I worked this huge swatch. And so this is kind of a rust-colored yarn, and I have also this, which I love. So I have 93 grams of this, and 48 of this, and 97 plus some in this rust color. So got lots of the sparkly, brightly colored, which is this. This is from Oink Pigments, and I felt like the slip stitch was a really great way to tone down what for me was a pretty bright color way, showing that our screens don't always show everything accurately. Although I always take it as a challenge to just buy something or get something that is kind of totally out of my color comfort. And then, so night before last, I cast on to make a little sample, and this is some yarn I've got from Round Mountain, and it's a DK merino. It's really springy, so I'm kind of interested to see what happens when Amazon guys are going by, and we live across from an apartment building, so they've got these huge containers that like two guys were moving together because there was so much, so they do a big delivery in the afternoon. So I did all the pink yesterday. You might recognize the pink from this. So I'm just kind of using up yarn. And I want to do a sample of the horizontal best hit dart. So this is for my half-size model. And this wonderful texture is just double seed stitch, which I love to knit seed stitch. So it was, obviously I just started knitting. I started about 8 o'clock and did that probably up till 10. So I'm going to TNNA and I will see all kinds of yarn producers, and I don't know why that's there. I can't see. Okay, Anne Marie's here and Christy is here. Okay, so when you got here, I had something blocking my screen. Oh, Christy is the Florida knitter, so why won't it just thank you. So I said today I would talk a little about the pattern tailor, which is kind of my passion project, and it's really so that I can provide people with access to things that they can do at any gauge. And so this week I published this to no fanfare because I was so exhausted I forgot to do social media, so that's coming. So this is just a cowl, and it's done using the slow stitch, which I kind of made up, but it creates this wonderful vertical on the outside, and on the inside you can see that you're just working horizontal rows. So I think it's really pretty cool. It's a very simple, just a cowl shape, and I changed needles so that it gets smaller towards the top. Let's see, I can put it on. And here there's my hummingbird. I've put a pin on it because I don't like that big floppy neck. And so by you making it bigger at the bottom than it is at the top, so there's no decreasing, so you don't have to worry sweat your stitch pattern. It means that it sits flat out here and then ends up kind of standing up. And so it would be like that without anything, or its natural inclination is to just fall forward. So if I were wearing this without, I would probably do that without a pin, but I always wear a pin. So, and for wearing in weather, you could pull it up tighter, but so it's a little heavier than some because it is 2 strands. So you're getting a lot of slipped stitches going on behind. So I published this. At the same time, I also published the Yarn Remainder Finder. I am just noted for my spiffy names, or the YRF as I call it. So what that does is it tells you how much yarn in yardage you have left. So you weigh it, and then the calculator will do all the math to figure out how much you have based on what a full skein has. So that's a free tool, but you have to buy it. You have to go through the shopping cart because the pattern tailor only works through the shopping cart, but it's totally free. And you can do it, buy it as many times as you need. You can only get one output per purchase, and you get a sheet. It's not exactly like this, but it's kind of like that. So you get a sheet that gives you all the information that you input, and then this is a different one. It tells you how much yarn you need based on unit of measure that you chose. So you can have meters or yards or inches or centimeters or grams or ounces, and you can have needle sizing, either metric or US sizing. So these calculators spit out a sheet like this, which can be printed, and then a version that is just digital. It won't print. So I did that because I figured people making this might want to use stash. And so being able to calculate how much yarn you have left is a good thing. And you can do it for any gauge yarn. And I love making little calculators like that. So Berkshire's The Cowl was the first thing that I did without Jamie in the pattern tailor. And oh my God, I had let her be in charge of the pattern tailor for like two and a half years, and I'd done virtually nothing. We got much more sophisticated than where I was when she took over, and she was able to do a lot of things that I kind of have a hard time with, like logic. And the sheets got pretty sophisticated, so plus that you have to use JSON, which is a little bit of coding to talk to the PHP server. So I had to relearn all of that. Well, we didn't have JSON when I did it, so I had to learn that. I had to relearn some of the stuff in the pattern tailor, which is all based in Excel, because I forgot because she was doing, and plus learn how to do the logic statements. And I have a hard time with logic. So when I was telling Mitch all this last night at dinner, he was just like, well, that makes sense. He kindly asked why I was cursing at my computer. And so I had to learn some algebra. Oh, God. I barely passed out of high school math. I passed college algebra because Mitch gave me great tutorials, and I had a great teacher help me with my remedial math skills when I went back to college. But never really, I mean, I understand it, but I have to, like, every single thing has to be described and explained to me. And so once I finally got this equation I needed to build, it made sense, but I would never have been able to build it without help. Thank you, all the Excel nerds, and Claude, he's actually very good at explaining things if you ask the right questions. So there was a lot of ups and downs. It was really exciting to get back to the pattern tailor because, as I said, it is my passion project. And there was kind of a sense of horror at what I no longer knew about it and had to relearn kind of on the go. But that, fear is always a good motivator. And I'm actually getting to the place where I can see when I make errors and figure out how to fix them. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. There were some panicked emails to Owen, the PHP guy, and Penny, my web mistress, because and she's a coder, so I had no idea what to do, but they bailed me out every time. So there's one thing I need to tidy up in the Berkshires, but it works. And so this week, as a treat to myself, I worked on making a calculator that will calculate how much yarn you need for either the long tail cast on or the flexible long tail cast on, and because that's kind of where you begin. And so that was really fun because there aren't that many things that have to be done, and they were basically the same. So it was, once I had the flexible long tail done, it was really easy to convert it to the long tail. I'm actually just doing the finishing touches on that. And this is the other thing that exists within Berkshire's, but I will do it as a separate calculator eventually. So this is an in the round swatch, and you got to make the floats long enough so you can get your 4 inches. Kind of made a mistake when I did these, and it's really tricky to measure if you can't get 4 inches flat. So when you're figuring out how much yarn you need for a project, we can do it, the pattern tailor can do it based on your swatch, because I just extrapolate the area of this to the area of the project that you're working. But I got to get rid of this weight because this is not actually part of your swatch. So that was where the algebra came in, I think. No, the algebra came in later. So, there was a day that I had written out like every single step of this by hand, and I had to then implement it in Excel. And, kind of the gaps in my logic were pretty, I'd say like, do this, but it actually took like 3 different steps in Excel, and then I have to kind of see everything. So I do it row by row so that I can break down the formula. I may end up going in and changing it into one long formula, but I have to do it step by step. And so that was a day. And then I've got a divide evenly formula, another thing I just love to do. But I've been doing it for so long that I can tell you what those numbers are going to be. And I had to figure out, this is where the algebra came in, how to find something. It's always X, aren't you? Always looking for X. Because there are 3 different situations that come up. So you can, at least in this stitch pattern, so you have an even number of decreases and you just do them, so you do knit 12, knit 2 together times whatever. And then there's the situation where you do, like, say, 12, knit 2 together, knit 10, knit 2 together. You do each of those 6 times, and then you've got some leftovers. So then you've got to tell it what to do with those leftovers. And then sometimes there's a leftover of both. So let's say there were 7 decreases needed on the higher stitch number and 5 on the lower. So you did, 2 of each 2 times, 2 of each 2 times to get 4, and then you've got a leftover of 1 and 3. And it's got to go into that written instruction, which is basically an Excel formula. But you have to say, it's all logic. Like, if this happens, then do this. If that happens, do that. And I have to figure out what possibly could happen. So it could actually end up that it ended up being easier to just say, like, you've got your low number of remainder, you've got your high number of remainder, and if you don't have any of one of them, just put a 0 in there so I can use the same instructions and the same chart. That's the pattern. That's the journey through the pattern, Tailor. Anyhow, I spent 2 days trying to figure that out. I could have figured out every single instance of anybody by hand in 2 days, but I have to do it so people can do it in the middle of the night when they're using the pattern Tailor and I'm sleeping. And so again, that will become a separate calculator. I think that once you use algebra, I will not be giving it away for free. So that one will probably cost you. And I think the swatch one will too, because again, it takes a lot of calculating behind the scenes. So like these, I don't have to do a lot of stuff in the back end to figure it out. It's pretty straightforward. So those kind of calculators I just do for free because I like to do them, and I think they often make people's knitting experiences much better. So tonight, during the music hour, I'm going to write up my notes about this, and you can see that the pattern stitch started at that outside decrease. It's actually along the very bottom here, but just in the brown, just in the transition, so you can't really see it. And at the same time, I think I'll do this scarf pattern, which I can do by heart. And plus that, I actually wrote up the instructions, but I like to sit while I'm listening to music and write out the steps for everything. And of course I forget tons, but at least then I have a structure. Oh, so this was another interesting thing, or interesting to me anyhow. So for years I taught product development at a fashion college, and which is all about, taking a product from concept to, and sometimes pre-concept, because you're looking to just address a problem, to creating something that you're selling. And product development is less involved in the marketing. Sometimes, marketing and product development are separate, or other times marketing is part of product development, and so things get kind of pitched to the marketing people as you reach the end, and it's going to be actually marketed. I'm no good at that part. So, but developing product it's always the same, even if the product is like wildly different. So Jamie had made these videos. I was actually surprised when I was listening to the videos. One of them is mine. I made it for her. So, but of course I'd forgotten, which is how I open my video. I am recording this because someday I will forget what I need to do here. And so there's, I've got Excel. I've got a pattern. I have all the supporting documents that have to go along with it. So one of them I'm calling the Pattern Accelerator, which basically takes you from choosing your yarn and needles through all the steps that you need to put your information into the pattern tailor. And all of that is available for free on my website. So it's called Pre-Berkshires. And I just decided that people need more information before they will choose to put something into the pattern tailor. So it's got the schematic, it's got swatching instructions, it tells you how to build a in the round swatch, techniques, videos. I think there are 8 technique videos. It tells you there's a video on how to choose the measurements you want for this. All of that is free. So all of that has to be developed. And, the accelerator for the Berkshires was a little more complicated than something, because I had to go through the whole round swatch thing. And so I tell you, take your end block measurements, wet block. Take your block measurements. And while you're waiting for your swatch to dry, watch the rest of the videos. So, videos have to be made, they have to be labeled, all this stuff. And then there's the Excel sheet. And for the pattern tailor, the minimum you have is you've got an input sheet, you've got an output sheet, and you have a calculations sheet. So some patterns, there's like a gauge sheet or an ease sheet. Sometimes there's just like a sheet of where all the, you've got like a million rows of calculations. So there's just a cover sheet for that, so you can find things easily. So all of that has to be built and managed. And so one of the things that I've been doing is creating SOPs, or process documentation. And it really helps to have something. And like each of the questions has to have a number designation on it. And each each section of the pattern has to have a different numbering system, because I have to make a fillable form. Oh God, fillable forms. Become the master of those. I recently discovered that how you can change some of the information on the fields, like the size and the centering, on a ton of those at the same time, which is great, because like in Berkshires I had so many fields that, because they're there in the written instructions to be filled in to tell you how many stitches, how many times to work, that sort of thing. But also in every chart, those same things have to be put in, because it will fill it in there. And so but I discovered how to do this kind of mass formatting, which is really great. And then the other thing is, so if you find a mistake, which of course you will only find when you're actually doing the fillable forms, like some formatting error or something. And if you go back to your original document and fix it, then you got to start over with the freaking form fields. But I discovered how to take out a page and put in a new page, so I only had to do that one page, or it was often two. So I've been writing on this one, but this is the header. So on the pattern, there's side-by-side pages, and so every pair of pages has the name, the date, the yarn that's being used, the needles that are being used, and what's the last thing? I guess that's it. So, Marie, love your advice. I always have good advice. So, every fucking page has to have those fillable forms. You can't just do it on one, because when the PDF, I do it on one to create the header, but the PDF flattens everything, so you can't access that as like, it's called a master page, that I can apply. But I've gotten really good at fillable forms. And they say you can edit a PDF. Jesus, I'd rather put my eyes out. It's so horrible to try and do that. It's not made for that. You can, but it's not made for it. And I'm really fussy about how things look, so it's got to be right. Anyhow, those are some of the behind the scenes. I am super proud that I did it, that I got it published, and that I'm learning how to do it myself. And so I'm jumping right back in, and we'll be starting new things. I've got a garment, a very simple garment that I'm going to put in so that I can practice whatever surprises are in that. And like, I know Anne Marie is really good, not only in Excel, but at math. And should have learned it back in high school. It would have been nice if somebody had talked the language of some creative girl who just they totally lost me. Which one do you take first? Geometry? I kind of got the basics of geometry, and after that it was just all horrible. So my high school had this great solution. Rather than actually teaching people who had trouble, they set up a program to make it so that you spent 3 semesters in geometry and then 3 semesters in algebra, because they figured we were just slow. And so the teacher who taught that in high school was a raging alcoholic. And if you caught him at the beginning of the day, he was a great guy, but he could kind of explain stuff, but he couldn't explain anything if you had an afternoon class. So between those two things and the fact that there was a guy I really liked, I think maybe we were in geometry together. And all I got out of that was some great drawing advice, because he was a really great artist. So thank God for all the nerds who put things up on the internet. It has saved my bacon. And I do think it's a good use of ChatGPT or Claude. I prefer Claude, to just kind of break down some of that math for me. So I'm like, no, you can't just tell me to find X. You have to tell me what X is and why I'm finding it. And then all those other terms that you're using, each one has to be explained to me and what it means to X. Because if you just give me letters, you give me a B, it's a B. It's not, the area. So everything has to be explained to me, and I should be humbled or embarrassed, but I'm not, that I don't know this stuff. And I think it's really good for my brain to be doing this, but it's exhausting. And then we've got what Trump is doing. So let me tell you, as a poor sleeper, I have some really interesting nights. I'm going to sign off because I want to do a couple things to the pattern tailor before I go down to start my writing part of the day. Last week I wasn't here because I've been having huge problems with my hands, which is terrifying. And the pain is mostly gone, except for right here. And I'm getting physical therapy, so it will get better. But it's really bad. So my mom had peripheral neuropathy, which I don't think is something that is hereditary, but I learned so many lessons from that, because she had always been a person who, just oh yeah, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden you've got a compressed spine and you can't feel your toes, except for the pain where your toes are. And so all you feel is pain. She had it in her hands, in her legs. It was horrible. It's not something I want to have. And so it's why I'm a loyal practitioner of Pilates, because I am afraid of letting my spine become non-flexible. So, it's not as flexible as it used to be, but it's still pretty good. So on that happy note, I'm going to do a few things in the pattern tailor. I'm going down to the dining room to make pattern notes, and I am going to have a huge martini tonight. So have a good weekend. Mitch and I are going to a rally at the Seattle Center. I have to tell you, I have never been to a political rally before, but I just feel like we have to do something. And, we live in a completely blue state. What I do doesn't matter, except to how it might impact other people at some point. So I regularly send letters to my Congress people and fill up their email. So, but they're doing all they can. If you live in a blue state or in a red state, I hope this doesn't get too bad for you. And on that happy note, bye bye. Have a good weekend. See you